Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, President Biden is in Israel today, making has to be one of the strangest trips any U.S. president has ever made in U.S. history, because as things stand, it still seems as if Israel is on the brink of launching a massive air, sea, and ground offensive against Hamas in Gaza. And yesterday, there was a massive explosion at the Al-Ahli Arab Hospital, which is a Baptist hospital. Some 500, who knows, maybe more people were killed. The Palestinians claim that this was an Israeli airstrikes. Israel claims that it was an errant missile launched by Islamic Jihad that was responsible. But strangely enough, Biden, who arrived in Israel, declared that he seems to support the Israeli interpretation of what happened. But even the New York Times pointed out it wasn't clear on what basis Biden was making that assertion, because he didn't say this is what U.S. intelligence has determined. He just seemed to say that according to the information that he has seen, the other team did it, which is again a strange way of describing the other team did it. Yeah. And then the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, the other day, when he was in Israel, declared that he came as a Jew, which is very, very strange, because the United States is expected to be a broker, a dispassionate broker. If you arrive and then declare that you come as a Jew, that sounds like you've already made up your mind, and you're on the one side of the fight rather than a dissident.
Well, Henry Kissinger never went to Israel and said, "I come as a Jew."
Exactly. It's so it was a very a strange thing. What's really odd about all of this is that for Biden to go to Israel at the moment when Israel is perpetrating atrocities, I mean, launching horrific attacks on Gaza, we're talking about thousands of people are dead, and is essentially going there to offer his support for Israel, then how are the rest of the world going to react? Particularly, how are the rest of the Arab world going to react? How are the rest of the world's Muslims going to react? They're going to direct their fury at the United States, because then they look at it and say the United States is enabling Israel with all this. That's what I mean. It's nothing like any other president. I mean, it's inconceivable, Ronald Reagan to have done this, either of the Bushes to have done this, just to go there and essentially put the American seal of approval on what's going on in Gaza. I mean, we think of bin Laden, who was enraged by the U.S. presence on, holy soil in Saudi Arabia, and obviously he was also outraged about U.S. support for Israel. But I mean, if you think of all the mini bin Ladens all around the world who are looking upon this, so it's hard to see what Biden could achieve if Biden were to go there and he would get a ceasefire from a commitment from Netanyahu. He said, all right, you've persuaded me. We're not going to go into Gaza. Okay, Mr. President, I'm persuaded. Then he could come back and say, yeah, mission accomplished. I did what I needed to do, and then everyone would hail Biden as a hero. But there's no indication that that's Biden's intent. He's basically giving a blank check to Netanyahu. So that's what I mean. It's a bizarre visit.
Well, George and I have been following politics for a hell of a long time. If you add up all the years, folks, okay, I don't even want to venture the thought of that number. George is absolutely right. I've never seen a president of the United States go into a middle of a crisis without an agenda, because that shows American power, projection of power for people to respect and fear. And he just shows up with cue cards, with answering no questions. Jake Sullivan and his entire national security establishment, they didn't telegraph. The president is looking for a ceasefire, a cessation of hostilities, a break. Talk about real numbers, like we have to open up this crossing. We need to have 48 hours of getting aid in. This is what the president was pushing for. And then you go there and you tell Bibi Netanyahu, I came all the way, so you got to go. You got to play ball with me.
Right.
None of that happened.
Yeah, no, that's
and look, Blinken trying to do the Kissinger shuttle. He couldn't even get American citizens out.
Right.
Okay, look at the Egyptians, and I saw President Sisi's response. No, you let all these people into the cyanide. You bring the conflict to me. I don't want it.
No.
And the Egyptians hate Hamas. Okay, they hate Hamas, all right? But, so you want to, Israel is unwilling to solve its problems with the Palestinians for over 7 decades, and you want to bring the problem to me? Really? Okay. I mean, it shows that this administration is just completely blind. It's like a piñata. They're trying to just swing in. They're saying what's going to happen. That it is such an embarrassment. And what it does is it clearly signals to people how degraded American power is, its resolve, everything. And then you have this buffoon president wandering around. So this is the most inexplicable visit in my lifetime of an American president. At least Trump went to North Korea and said, hey, let's give peace a chance. I mean, he still gets criticism for it. I think it was one of the most masterful things I've ever seen a politician do. Okay, he went there with resolve, with a plan, and he listened to the wrong people. That's right. Trump.
That's the thing, that Biden seemed to come with no agenda other than to express solidarity with Israel. But then the question arises: why would you want to do that? Because even if you wanted to express, let's say you have an emotional feelings about what happened to Israel, then the time to have done that would have been immediately after the October the 7th attack. Go there 2 days later and say, well, we're with you, this terrible attack. But now this is already 11 days later. This is, during this time, the situation has changed. We've had this, daily onslaught on Gaza by Israel. So now when you express solidarity with Israel, that means you're expressing solidarity with what Israel is doing on Gaza. This is already nothing to do with that attack, which was already a long time ago. So that it's a very strange thing for him to do. And now the response has been that he was going to meet with Sisi, Mohammed Abbas, and the
Jordanian president, right?
Yeah, and the Jordanian king. So they were going to meet. That meeting it was supposed to take place in Amman, and that meeting has been canceled. Now, of course, they should never have agreed to meeting Biden in the first place. But nonetheless, they've said that they particularly in light of what happened at the hospital, they're not going to do it. But again, that just shows, well, that was always on the card, that they were going to just simply cancel on you at the last minute, which again is a humiliation for the United States. And in the meantime, we have this 2 aircraft carrier groups in the Mediterranean. Then we have a 2,000 Marine strong expeditionary force somewhere in the vicinity. We're not quite sure where it is. And then we have another 2,000 strong force of backup, hospital, doctors, not quite sure what the kind of, backup from whoever. It's not clear what the purpose of this is, because it's too weak to send in as any kind of an armed force into battle. I mean, we talk about 4,000 people. That's going to be nothing. So it's supposedly to deter. I'm not quite sure who it's supposed to deter. I mean, I guess they're trying to deter Hezbollah.
But it actually escalates.
It escalates, And I don't think it's going to deter Hezbollah. If Hezbollah makes a decision to get involved, they're going to get involved. They're not going to be impressed by a couple of aircraft carrier groups in the Mediterranean. Okay, they want to attack Lebanon. Let them attack Lebanon. They've done it before. Go ahead. They're used to attacks on Lebanon, so it's not going to deter anyone. So it's a very bizarre show of force. As I say, just as a bizarre kind of visit. What are you trying to achieve with this, with this show of force?
Well, also, since you brought up the two carrier groups, George, so what are they doing right now in the Eastern Mediterranean? Oh, I suppose they're monitoring the situation. I suppose they're surveying the situation. So they know full well who bombed that hospital. They have the technology. They saw it. And probably it was a technician on one of those carriers saying, that was a big one. Okay. Right. And play that back for me. Oh, okay. Come on. This is blatant lying. Okay. Lying. Okay. They know exactly what happened. They have eyes all over the place.
I agree. Particularly if it's an airstrike. Airstrike would be very easy to detect. Was there an airstrike or wasn't there? I mean, that's not rocket science to establish that.
And on top of it, everyone, why would they? Just to be clear here, aircraft carriers are very vulnerable. So you have to be hyper vigilant of what's coming at you and what your situational environment is. That's why they have these very high technology surveil, because one big missile like that one that hit the hospital, that can take a carrier, maybe damage it, maybe even take it out. So there's no way in the world someone can convince me they missed that one. On top of it, everyone, looking at least since the start of hostilities from October 7th, the missiles that have been coming out of the Gaza Strip, they can tear a roof off of a building, they can destroy cars, but we've never seen one projectile hit Israel with that kind of magnitude. Okay. And plus they have the Iron Dome. Most of them are being caught right now. So these are improvised. Whatever hit that hospital, well, if anything, George, it was big. Okay.
Right. No, I think that's right. I mean, it would have been a missile that size is beyond the abilities of
let's be careful. It's beyond the capabilities of anything we've seen to date.
Right. No, I think that's right. That's exactly right. And again, we can't make a statement as yet. It's kind of, but you would have to think though that given the evasiveness of the U.S., I think if the U.S. had convincing evidence that this was indeed an errant missile, fired by Islamic Jihad, I think they would have been very eager to present
all over it. And absolutely,
that's why Biden's formulation was very evasive. Clearly, that was presented to him. He says, "Well, from what I've been told, that it was the other team that was responsible. However, it's not yet certain." So he was hedging his bets. He didn't want to just make the declaration, yeah, they did it. You're off the hook. So it was a deliberately. They told him exactly, use this formulation. So, oh well, you've been told, but maybe I got it wrong. So that if when the information comes out, because the information is going to come out, then you can say, well, I don't know, it's what I was told. It was in the fog of war. That's that's what I'd heard. So, but there's again there's a certain pattern with the Biden administration, which is a kind of recklessness. I mean, when you think of the recklessness with which they pursued their policy in Ukraine, doing things that no administration had ever done before, actually, antagonizing Russia in its own backyard, providing weaponry to Ukraine with which it can hit Russian territory, kill Russians. No one had ever gone there. Biden did, and now Biden has done this. It's a remarkable, reckless policy. I mean, this is a person manifestly unsuitable for holding the position he holds.
Well, and it's very interesting. I mean, ever since the bombing of the hospital, there's been an enormous amount of hyper analysis. Most of it kind of weak, but some of it quite interesting. And given what George just kind of introduced to us here, these people, these Jake Sullivans, which apparently it really is the architect of a lot of these things, hyper involved, and they're looking for a master stroke that can change the whole situation. Very rarely does that happen in history. Okay, I mean, you have to be very careful because there's so many unintended consequences, and of course there's the issue of the outstanding issue of Syria for this administration too. So if we see hostilities, meaning Hezbollah gets involved, I mean, the United States might think, hey, this is time time to tie up some loose ends. Okay, everybody keep in mind, two airports in Damascus and Aleppo, their airports were destroyed by the Israelis early into this conflict. Okay, so it's part of the mix right here. But as I said earlier, these two aircraft carriers, they escalate things. They don't deter anything.
I think it's very hard to see how the United States can get involved in Syria simply because they just don't have the manpower. I mean, let's say you want to get rid of Bashar al-Assad, which has been the U.S. policy since Obama 2012. Well, 4,000, 6,000 Marines isn't going to do it. Because again,
well, and the Americans that are there could be very much exposed.
Exactly, they're exposed, and in fact, Americans throughout the regions are very vulnerable because there are American bases everywhere, but they're not that big. So
but George, one of the reasons why I'm bringing it up, okay, this is kooky, this is crazy stuff, but it's on the agenda. Why is it being mentioned? Because this is payback against Russia for Ukraine, okay? And and will the Russians, because the Russians are busy with Ukraine, will they come again and save pull Assad's chestnuts out of the fire? I mean, this is kind of like a high school debating club debate. This is kind of ridiculous, but apparently it's being floated around. Okay,
right. No, I mean, maybe it's floated around. I mean, it ain't gonna happen because they simply don't have the forces there. I mean, to mount an invasion of Syria, I mean,
no, I don't think like an invasion of. I mean, just obliterate Damascus.
I mean, if they try to do that, I mean, obviously they have the firepower to do that. The United States would then have to present at least the minimum of explanation as to why they've done this. I mean, in other words, if you say
it was the Syrians that blew up the hospital, that's all you need.
Well, okay. Well, I mean, they'd have to make that claim. I mean, at least that would be a start if you make that particular.
Well, in some rogue group in Ukraine blew up the Nord Stream. George, come on,
right? Exactly
the same area.
Okay? Right. Okay. Well, I mean, because as things stand, I mean, it's we've got Israel, we've got Hamas, we've got Islamic Jihad. I mean, Assad hasn't really been brought into the
nor does he want to be. Nor does he want to be.
Right. So I want to just show you the news conference of Netanyahu and Biden, and if you just this is again the strangeness of this. Let me just do this. So here's Netanyahu, who says, oh, thank you for coming, blah, blah, and for the unequivocal support you have given Israel during these trying times. So again, unequivocal. Israel's a war, you're saying it's unequivocal. So, again, it's putting Biden on the spot, but Biden apparently has no objection to being put on the spot.
Wag the dog, keep going.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen your support every day in the depth and breadth of cooperation that we have had since the beginning of this war, a level of cooperation that is truly unprecedented in the history of the great alliance between our two nations. We see that support in your steadfast commitment to provide Israel with the tools we need to defend ourselves. We see that support in the clear message you've sent our enemies not to test our resolve, and in the 2 American carrier battle groups that you sent to the region to back up those words with action. So now he's suggesting that these carrier groups are there to support Israel, which again is.
I think even more than that, George. These two carrier groups. They're waiting for Bibi's call. Apparently, I mean, the Israelis are calling the shots.
That's right. Yes. And then, but above all, Mr. President, the world sees that support in the moral clarity that you have demonstrated from the moment Israel was attacked.
Joe Biden in moral clarity. The only time you'll ever see that together.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I was expecting, to be honest, Biden to announce at some point that he's a Holocaust survivor. Yes, I'm a Jew and I'm a Holocaust survivor. My mother was in Auschwitz, and she told me stories about Auschwitz. I was expecting it, and it may still happen. I mean, yep. He hasn't left yet, so he may still announce that he's a Holocaust survivor. You've rightly drawn a clear line between the forces of civilization and the forces of barbarism. You describe what Hamas did as sheer evil. It is exactly that. Hamas murdered children in front of their parents, parents in front of their children. They burned people alive. They raped and murdered women. They beheaded soldiers. They searched the secret hiding places where parents hid their children. And just imagine, Mr. President, the fear and panic of those little children in their last moments as the monsters found out their hiding places.
I'm sorry, Judge, but it's all projection.
Exactly. And it says Hamas kidnapped women, children, elderly, Holocaust survivors. I know that you share our outrage on this, and I know that you share our determination to bring these people back. On October the 7th, Hamas murdered 1,400 Israelis, maybe more. This is in a country of fewer than 10 million. Well, I mean, if you're going to use those numbers, I mean, Gaza, how many Gazans have you killed? And that's just 2 million people. So, and then this would be the equivalent of over 50,000 Americans murdered in a single day. That's 20 in 9/11. So we do some serious arithmetic here. That is why October the 7th is another day that will live in infamy. And then, Mr. President, you rightly said that Hamas is worse than ISIS. Well, Biden did say that, which is a very, very bizarre thing to say, because in the first place, a number of these claims about what Hamas did is exaggeration. I mean, it doesn't really operate the way ISIS operates. But essentially, I mean, ISIS is just simply a murderous organization, absolutely fanatics. Hamas isn't that. I mean, Hamas is, it does represent the people. They won an election. When has ISIS ever won an election? They won an election.
Also, George, ISIS is a scourge, no doubt about it. And it's reared its ugly head in a number of countries in the Middle East. But interestingly, George, they've never attacked Israel.
That's exactly right.
As a matter of fact, the Israel gave aid and comfort to ISIS fighters in Syria. Yeah, okay, right. So got them back on their feet, as it were, to go back fighting. I always find that interesting. They hate Jews and all that. Well, I mean, they're all over the region at the behest of America's war on global terror. But the ISIS never has taken an interest in Israel. No, quite interesting.
No, ISIS hasn't. Al-Qaeda hasn't. But it's one of these very clever rhetorical tricks that Israel plays, because they know that Americans are preoccupied with Islamic terror, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. So they persuade Americans that they too are preoccupied with ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and that's why people like Sean Hannity and Mark Levin, Israel is at the forefront of the global fight in terror. They have to fight Islamic terror every day, every minute of every day. So totally untrue. But that's how they persuade. They persuade. Yeah, they're absolutely out there in the front line. If it weren't for Israel, we would be, completely overwhelmed by Islamic terror. Total lie. But it's a very useful rhetorical. Well, we have to support Israel. Look, I mean, they have to fight with this Islamic terror all the time. I mean, they did that during the Cold War as well, when they sort of pretended that their fight in the Middle East was against Soviet communism, and somehow that's the source of the problem in the Middle East. And the Americans bought into it. The Reagan administration bought into it. Yeah, it's all the Soviet Union. That's really the source of the problems in the Middle East. The communists. So it's a very clever way of just manipulating gullible Americans.
And also ISIS and Al-Qaeda and the other 31 flavors of Islamic jihadism, they're international movements, and they have an international agenda. You can like or dislike Hamas. I'm my favorite group of people, okay? But their agenda is liberation from oppression, from the blockade, and from avoiding being dislocated still again, being ethnically cleansed. So putting Hamas in the category of ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
No, that's right. Exactly. And that's exactly right. And again, they won that election in 2006. No one has ever claimed that was a fraudulent election. There were
the U.S. government paid for it. The State Department paid for that election.
That's right. Jimmy Carter was there. They all said this was a fair election. Hamas won it. ISIS has never won any election. ISIS has no soul. I mean, ISIS imposes itself through sheer terror. That's all ISIS has. And says the German chancellor who visited here yesterday, good old Sergeant Schultz, nothing would be quite the same as the arrival of Sergeant Schultz. The German chancellor who visited here yesterday said that Hamas were the new Nazis. You're both right. Now, this is very, very interesting because the Israeli line has always been that nothing compares with the Holocaust. That's it. There's just one Holocaust. That's unique. And even to compare anything else with the Holocaust is anti-Semitic. I mean, that's always been the Israeli line. Now you're saying that this is the Holocaust, and now you're saying that the Hamas are the Nazis, which he's saying that. And remember, the New York Times, whenever it repeats, says something. President Putin falsely claims that Ukraine is run by Nazis. President Putin falsely asserts as justification for the war in Ukraine that Ukraine is Nazi. Where is the statement that Benjamin Netanyahu falsely claims that Hamas are the new Nazis? Because also, Hamas has nothing to do with the Nazis.
Also, what's interesting is that the term Nakba, catastrophe, for the dislocation of 750,000 Palestinians in 1948, when the state of Israel was established. The Israeli government frowns very strongly on anyone using the term Nakba, okay? But lo and behold, over the last 7 days, it's come back into vogue with Israeli politicians and media. We need another Nakba, which of course is they're recognizing the original one, which they like to deny. No, these people just left. They just left. Okay, they left the keys in their house door and they just walked to Jordan. Okay, so there's so many narratives being undone here.
Yes, no, that's right. And just as a civilized world united to defeat the Nazis and united to defeat ISIS, the civilized world must unite to defeat Hamas. So again, who is the civilized world? I mean, because that's going to exclude a lot of countries, because a lot of countries don't think that we have to take an even-handed approach to the Middle East. Just simply united against Hamas isn't going to solve the problem, and just making it good and evil, and you're good and Hamas is evil, and the world is obligated to rally behind you because you're good and Hamas is evil. Well, that isn't going to work. I mean, you might get Ursula von der Leyen and Biden signing on to that, but nobody else is going to sign on to that. And
well, I mean, again, this is a form of projection, because I think it's fair to say that more when people are given an even-handed review of what has happened for the last 70 years, you'll start thinking, well, it's not what I've been told. Okay. I mean, Israel is afraid of the world ganging up on them. So they say that the world must gang up on Hamas. Okay. Don't look at me, look at them. Okay.
Right, but that's the thing is, but it isn't going to work. I mean, because no one is going to say, other than the usual Western powers, that it's all about Hamas, because they know that, well, you're actually playing games with us, which is to isolate somehow one event from the entire context of event, to say, well, we just need to focus on that and not focus on anything else, not focus on the entire history of this conflict. And so that's why whenever the Americans, they go to the UN Security Council and they want to issue a resolution which somehow singles out Hamas, for condemnation, and then Russians or Chinese are going to say, no, we're not going to support this. We're not going to make this about Hamas. We will support a resolution that calls for ceasefire, humanitarian aid, and the beginning of some kind of a negotiating process. But we're not just going to support your condemnation of Hamas as if it's all really just about Hamas.
Well, and again, the level of hypocrisy is just spectacular. When the American representative of the United Nations, when she knows that how to put it, she knows that they cannot go down that path, because then it would open up avenues of introspection and whatnot. So, I mean, it should be about a ceasefire, stop the killing, okay? Right. But the U.S. doesn't want to stop the killing. The Biden administration doesn't want. What they want to do is they want to somehow finesse a way, in a way that they are not going to be held responsible for anything, which is just the opposite, because this whole trip.
Right. Well, that's the thing. Exactly. Once you make this trip, you can't then turn around and say this has nothing to do with us, because if Biden leaves, I think he's leaving today, and then tomorrow Netanyahu launches his offensive, then Biden's on the hook. I mean, basically, so obviously, basically, Biden gave you the green light. The U.S. gave the green light, and therefore the U.S. is responsible for any and all subsequent atrocities and horrors.
And on top of it, George, Biden has quite literally put America on the hook to pay the bills. Also, okay, that's what you said in Jerusalem. That's what you said. You unequivocal support. Okay, so where's that?
Yeah, no,
where's that next 10 billion? And make it
right.
Make it quick.
That's right. That's right. The European Union will also be on the hook. That's a classic, because the EU always does this. That Israel pulverizes Gaza, and then the EU forks over money for reconstruction of Gaza. Israel doesn't pay a penny. The EU does it. But and it's particularly outrageous because in the EU there is a very sharp division of opinion about Israel and Gaza. It's not even like United States, where at least there's pretty much a bipartisan support for Israel. But in the EU, that doesn't exist, and the EU still, stupidly goes, all right, well, we'll pay for this reconstruction. You had nothing to do with destroying Gaza, but we'll just pay for the reconstruction.
Yeah, and who's destroying these? Israel's destroying EU funded projects. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So the forces of civilization will prevail for our sake, for your sake, for peace and security in our region and in the world. Mr. President, for the people of Israel, there's only one thing better than having a true friend like you standing with Israel, and that is having you standing in Israel. Your visit here is the first visit of an American president in Israel at a time of war. So he's really rubbing it in that Biden, yep, you were here at a time of war, and we will, and I want everyone in the world to know you are here at a time of war. So it's not just, I just came in,
yeah, but this is like some kind of legal deposition.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
I
sir.
mean, we know that you were here. We knew that you said this. We have this on camera. We have the transcript here. You said this. Okay. I mean, this sounds like
That's right. There's only one thing better than having a
this is
true
like
friend.
is Joe Biden facing a grand jury here?
Well, that's it. Standing with Israel, and that is having you standing in Israel. Your visit here is the first visit of an American president in Israel at the time of war. It is deeply, deeply moving. So yeah. So because yes, Lyndon Johnson didn't come here in 1967. Richard Nixon didn't come here in 1973. But yeah, boom, you showed up. Thank you very much. It's all on record. We've got everything here. It speaks to the depth of your personal commitment to Israel. It speaks to the depth of your personal commitment to the future of the Jewish people and the one and only Jewish state. So I now speak for all of the people of Israel when I say, thank you, Mr. President. Thank God he didn't say, I now speak for all the Jewish people of the world. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for standing with Israel today, tomorrow, and always. And then Biden got to speak. And he said, look, folks, so that, there's something distinctly unpresidential about Biden. Look, folks, just as is, it's the other team that was responsible. Look, folks, I wanted to be here today for a simple reason. I wanted the people of Israel, the people of the world to know where the United States stands. I've had my great Secretary of State here. He's been here for a lot, but I wanted to personally come and make that clear. The terrorist group Hamas has slaughtered, as has been pointed out, over 1,300 people, and it is not hyperbole to suggest slaughtered, and including 31 Americans as part of that. Now, again, I mean, Hamas, obviously, they killed civilians. They also killed a lot of military people. I'm not quite sure yet what the breakdown was, but slaughter isn't quite the right word. And then he says there's 31 Americans. But again, they never explain in what context. Are these Americans like American civilians, or were these Americans serving in the Israel Defense Forces? They never want to spell this out because of this. It's a strange phenomenon. We have US citizens who are serving in the Israeli Defense Forces. They don't serve in the US Armed Forces, but they serve in Israel Defense Forces. They're kind of a strange thing. For instance, David Brooks of the New York Times, well-known columnist on the New York Times, his son serves in the IDF, and it's a sort of strange thing. Well, why does his son serve in the IDF but not in the U.S. Armed Forces? I mean, Brooks is an American citizen. He lives in the United States. He writes for the New York Times. I mean, why is his son serving in the IDF?
I don't have the number in front of me right now, and I'm sure it's increased since I last looked at it. But look at the members of Congress that have Israeli citizenship as well.
Yeah, no, that's exactly, no, it's a fascinating phenomenon, which tends to get covered up, because hey, if anything, scream anti-Semitism is, anything, an inquiry along those lines. Then he said, and they've taken scores of people hostage, including children. You said, imagine what those children hiding from Hamas were thinking. It's beyond my comprehension to be able to imagine what they were thinking, beyond my comprehension. They're committed evils and atrocities that make ISIS look somewhat more rational. This is nuts. I mean, that's such a stupid thing to say. But no.
Well, considering he was part of an administration, the Obama administration, that had so intermingled themselves with these groups, okay, particularly in Syria. So yeah. It's not only is it stupid, it's just disingenuous. Okay?
Yeah. And of course, remember that time. Of course, you remember when ISIS was at, you remember that convoy of trucks waiting to get refueled. They were getting fuel on the border with Turkey. A long line of trucks. Remember Obama had claimed that we're fighting ISIS, but here's this long convoy of trucks getting fuel from Turkey. And strangely enough, the United States isn't bombing. There it is, broad daylight. You just can destroy all of these trucks. But the United States is letting them, fill up their tanks with oil. So yes, absolutely.
And probably clean their windshield while they were waiting.
That's right.
There's a lot of bugs in the.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, Americans are grieving with you. They really are. And Americans are worried. Americans are worried because we know this is not an easy field to navigate what you have to do. So again, what you have to do. So giving is an endorsement what you have to do, rather than what you have to do is to get a ceasefire. And you need to bring this to an end, because we kind of want the killings to come to an end. We just don't want, we as Americans don't want to see a cycle of violence that's just going to be repeated over and over again in the coming years. You would think that's what an American president would say. But the fact is that Israel, as they responded to these attacks, it seems to me that have to continue to ensure that you have what you need to defend yourselves, and we're going to make sure that occurs, as you know. So again, he's enabling. He's an enabler.
Yeah, without any specifics, George. It's very, very broad brushed, all of this.
Very broad brush, yeah.
I mean, is this policy on the fly here? Because it certainly sounds like it.
And then he says, and we have to also bear in mind that Hamas does not represent all the Palestinian people and has brought them only suffering. This is very interesting, because here Biden is distancing himself from from the Israeli President Herzog, but also from Nikki Haley and the like, because they actually do say that there's no distinction between Palestinians and Hamas, and therefore the distinction between civilian and military targets disappears, because if you kill people, but they're Hamas supporters, so they deserve to die.
Well, I mean, the president of Israel, Herzog, and Nikki Haley, they've essentially adopted the Al-Qaeda doctrine. Yeah. There is no such thing as a civilian. So it's the kind of Al-Qaedization of American policy, at least for some.
No, that's exactly right. So so you don't have to worry about attacking civilian targets, because there are no civilian targets in Gaza, because apparently, I mean, the logic is that if they didn't like Hamas, they could have just got rid of them, which itself is very interesting, because at the same time, they want to insist that Hamas is a military dictatorship. So they say, well, apparently you're responsible for anything Hamas does because you didn't get rid of Hamas. But of course, then that would really suggest that bin Laden has an even stronger argument, because America, after all, is a democracy. And therefore, hey, you at least had a chance. You can go vote and get rid of these rulers. So therefore, all Americans are legitimate targets because they didn't vote the right way. But here, apparently you are responsible for not getting rid of military dictators. So that's quite a strong argument.
But what's happening here, everyone, is the diminishing international humanitarian law. Okay, the Israelis are doing it. The Americans are doing it now. They're taking that's why we don't hear anything about this. That's a category that they don't want to address any longer. Okay, and that is really dangerous. And then it gets down to killing anyone for any reason anywhere is somehow justified. That's how far away we've drifted away from the lessons of Nuremberg.
So it says, years ago, I asked the Secretary of State when he and I were working in the Senate to write something for me. And he wrote a line that I think is appropriate. He said, we lead not just, well, I won't go into it. I'll wait until later. I'm taking too much time. So that's Bidenism classically. Yeah. What was it that he wrote? Everyone's with bated breath. What was it?
He probably said
what I was going to say.
Blinken probably wrote, "We're all survivors of the Holocaust."
That's it. We're all Holocaust survivors. Yeah. But the point is this: that I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team. They put together a nice team. Not you, but there's a lot of people out there who are not sure. So you notice this caveat, but there's a lot of people out there who are not sure. Who does he mean? Who are these people out there? You mean, people in Gaza, or you mean among his own team, among his own foreign policy intelligence team who are not sure? So, but he kind of leaves it at that.
Yeah, but
So
George has already made it very clear, and it's the most important point when it comes to this destruction of this hospital, this atrocity, is if they had the goods, they would be waving this like a
right,
flag in your face. Okay,
right,
so
yeah,
this is just,
right,
this is just dumb. I mean, there's
yeah,
no sophistication to it
that's
whatsoever.
right, that's right. Yeah. And then he says, and it also means encouraging life-saving capacity to help the Palestinians who are innocent, caught in the middle of this. And well, at any rate, that's who we are. Not just me, but I mean that's who in the United States is. And it's just not an example of our power. It's the power of our example that's almost as important. Sounds like Obama there. I mean, that sounds a little bit. It's not just the example of our power; it's the power of our example. It sounds like Obama. It could even have been Hillary Clinton. It sort of it sounds better when you practice in front of the mirror than when you actually say it out loud.
George, somebody stole that from somewhere.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
these
I've
people.
heard it before, but I can't remember whether it was Obama. But I mean, Obama probably stole it from somebody. But it sounds like it again. It doesn't mean anything, and that's why I thought it might have been Obama. I mean, I'm sure Obama used it because Obama liked saying these kinds of things, which seems as if you're saying something, but you're really not.
I think it came from the American Boy Scouts or something like that. Okay, because I remember that phrase when I was growing up. Okay, I was a Boy Scout. Okay, yeah.
The world is looking. Israel has a value set like the United States does and other democracies, and they're looking to see what we're going to do. So, Mr. Prime Minister, I'm very happy to be back in Israel with you. Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to having a thorough discussion about where everybody goes from here. But thank you. So, I mean, I was thinking that, okay, trying to figure out why did Biden do this, because it's so odd. And
Please explain to me, George. I can't understand it.
Exactly. The only explanation I had, and I'm just trying to think rationally, is that Netanyahu really doesn't want to go into Gaza. He just thinks this is just going to be a meat grind. There's going to be absolute mass slaughter. And he's looking for a way out. And if he can bring Biden in, and then he can say, all right, President Biden, we had a long talk, and he persuaded me that in the interest of humanitarianism, we should just call a ceasefire, maybe temporary ceasefire, and then we can make the temporary ceasefire a permanent ceasefire, and that somehow gets Netanyahu off the hook and say, well, I couldn't do anything. Biden made me do it.
I think it split the difference this one on this one, at least as we're speaking right now. You may be right about the land invasion because that's just Stalingrad 2023, right. Okay? And the Israelis don't have the stomach for it, okay? But I think by splitting the difference, go ahead, bomb it to smithereens.
Yeah, I think so too.
And we'll give you the munitions to do it, right. Okay? Right. And that won't be a cause belli for Hezbollah.
Right. Okay. That's right. That's exactly it. I think yeah, I don't think it's going to be an immediate ceasefire, but he can just simply go on bombing and bombing and bombing. And then he can just declare a ceasefire when you've just reduced everything to rubble. But the fact is he hasn't gone in. We've been expecting him to go in, and we keep waiting and waiting. He hasn't done it. And therefore, you have to think that he just doesn't want to do this. This is, Israel is, and has always been, casualty averse. It really doesn't like getting into conflicts where it suffers great casualties. Remember, even Lebanon, they were bombing. They bombed. They inflict the casualties on others, but they were bombing West Beirut. That just they don't want to go in for hand-to-hand fighting. I mean, that's just not what Israel does.
Well, that will mean that Hamas has achieved a strategic victory because they will still be standing. They will still be standing. And so there we go. It's, the god-awful phrase of mowing the lawn. Well, this is a lot more than mowing the lawn. But I think our calculus is right. I I think Netanyahu also kind of, humping Joe Biden's leg, showing that, he's still relevant. The
Right.
president of the United States came all the way here to talk to me. Well,
Right.
everybody knows that however this is said and done, Netanyahu is toast. Okay.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay.
I think so too.
Because in his performance there, I maybe with just the most hawkish of them all was like, well, at least Bibi got this right, but because he got things so wrong that we're here right now. And is Joe Biden aware of that? Is he oblivious to it? I mean, that is such the statement that he went all the way to Israel to say those words, George.
Right, exactly.
I mean, not even eloquent. I mean, this is no Gettysburg Address.
I mean, his first words, folks.
Hey,
folks. I mean, I mean, mind you, I mean, Obama, who's supposed to be so eloquent. You remember when there was that report? Was it Senate report about the torture?
Okay, we tortured some folks.
We tortured some folks. Oh, okay, we just tortured some folks. Okay, that's good. There's some folks, yeah. So I think that this would be he goes there. I mean, if Netanyahu were to go in and it was an absolute slaughterhouse, huge Israeli casualties, I mean, he's already, I think, toast. But at least he can survive for a little bit longer. I mean, he would just be out. I mean, if the Israeli casualties start mounting and everything, because I mean, remember what happened to Menachem Begin. I mean, after the Lebanon disaster. But Netanyahu really cannot survive this because he's supposed to be an expert on these things. He's supposed to be an expert on military stuff.
Security.
Yeah, security, intelligence. That's his bailiwick. I mean, after the Yom Kippur war, Golda Meir, the reports that Golda Meir was incompetent, but she said, well, I'm just an old woman. What do I know about these things? I'm just a nice, sweet old Jewish woman. I mean, I don't know about military stuff and intelligence stuff. She sort of got away with that a little bit. People, well, maybe she's just an old woman who doesn't understand these things. Netanyahu doesn't have that luxury. This is what he's supposed to be an expert on. So he can't say, oh, I didn't know.
The interesting thing is, unfortunately, is that we've seen a lot of Benjamin Netanyahu over the years. I mean, he's like a bad cold that won't go away. Well, I think he's finally got the flu, but I don't know, George, just my impression, because I remember seeing him all the way back in the 1990s. Okay,
when he was in New York, he was the UN ambassador. Yeah.
And for decades, he didn't seem to age at all. Remarkable. Okay. But when I saw some video when he was visiting some of the troops that were being mobilized, for the first time, that was a changed man. He was haggard. He didn't have the same vigor. He looked terrified, to be honest with you. Okay.
Yeah. So,
I mean, it seems to me at this juncture, he's just trying to cobble together some kind of legacy. Okay.
Right.
Because as soon as the coast is clear, he better just pack his bags. I don't know where he's got his homes abroad, but
that's right. I think it's a very good point about his physical appearance, which is that he really didn't age. I mean, that the first time I saw him, as you said, when he was Israel's UN ambassador, I mean, he looked exactly the same. I mean, he has that same kind of beefy kind of visage, and he look 30 years later, he just looks exactly the same. But now he does look he looks old and haggard. And this has been a real hit, and he's coming under a lot of attack. And there's obviously going to be reports. They're going to be whitewash. I mean, all these reports, they're often whitewashers, but there'll be enough that's damaging to him. But at the same time, one thing you have to keep in mind is Israeli politics is actually quite forgiving, because remember after the Shatta and Sabrilla, there was a report, there was the Kahan Commission report, and it pretty much laid the blame on Ariel Sharon. Sharon was the defense minister. He had to resign. And we all assumed that, well, that's it. That's the end of Ariel Sharon's career. But lo and behold,
there's a lot of Nixons in
you disappear, because Israel kind of likes these tough guys, and they brought in Sharon after totally discredited. Imagine that report. It just said he's basically responsible for what happened to those women and children. And you think no man can possibly recover from that, a general particular. I mean, he did. And he became prime minister. He was promoted.
Before I forget, because it's important, I just saw a short clip, because everybody knows I don't watch CNN, but shortly after the catastrophe in the hospital, I saw this clip of this CNN pretend journalist, is that I'm paraphrasing here, everyone. All roads lead to the fact that Hamas did this to their own people. I mean, how could CNN even possibly know? Okay.
Right.
I mean, when considering major news organizations over the last 20 years have just gutted their research part, okay? Right. They just have pretty people with makeup, and then they fly them to a location that's perfectly safe, of course, and then they report what anyone in New York could possibly say, okay?
Right. No, that's exactly right. I mean, and of course, it's similar to the claims that were made at the time of the beheaded babies, the 40 beheaded babies. And again, they just made these assertions as if the claims by the Israeli defense ministry we have to accept. In other words, we just accept them and without any real question.
Like the Ukraine defense ministry.
That's right. We just accept them. But of course, anything that Russia says, well, we were not able to verify Russia's claims. It was always, but that's Russia's claims, and impossible to verify. But Israeli defense ministry, Ukrainian defense ministry, okay, that's fine. We just put them in. But that's been the tendency for many years in the U.S. media, which treats Israel as an adjunct of the United States. So it's like, if the Israeli defense ministry says something, well, it's like as if the Pentagon said something, or the State Department. Well, we're biased towards them. We actually accept what they say. We accept that they're telling something truthful. I mean, no basis for saying, well, why should we believe what the Pentagon says? I mean, they're an interested party, but nonetheless, the media treats these claims as if these are honest, decent people doing their best to get to the truth of things. Maybe they make a few mistakes here and there, but they're doing their best. They're honest. Looking at the facts as they come in, and giving us the truth as best they can. But that's the attitude towards this Israeli defense.
What do you think the Biden people? What's their political calculus for domestic politics here? Because as everyone unfortunately knows, because of the media, academia, there is a largely a bipartisan view about the issue of Israel. It's been that case for a very, very long time. The thing is that, as someone said to me once, a politician, he said, you can never be pro-Israel enough, okay? Because there's no downside, okay? But my question is to you, George, is that we see what's going on in the Gaza Strip, and that is a situation that is not tenable, not for a very long time, because then you're going to start getting diseases. You're going to have famine. You're going to have really horrific things. I don't even want to imagine. That's a limited time frame. Okay, so I mean, Joe Biden can be the savior of the Israeli people, the goodness of Americans, and all that kind of mushy stuff that he could barely say in his speech. But the shelf life of that's not very long. So I just don't understand the political.
No, I think it's a very good question, but I think that the Democratic Party and the left in general they're a little uncomfortable. Yes, overall there's support for Israel, but there's strong elements within the Democratic Party. I mean, first of all, there are now substantial Muslim population in the United States. They, by and large, vote for the Democrats, so they're obviously not on board for any wholehearted support for Israel. But there's also the political left that is always been a little skeptical of Israel, and they see Palestinians as indigenous people who have been displaced by colonizers. It's very much a kind of a leftish cause. So the Democrats are much more split. My own feeling is that the Republicans, may well be trapped into thinking, hey, we can attack Biden for being insufficiently
Weak on
zealous.
Israel.
He's
Yeah.
not doing enough for our
Yeah.
allies. He's not doing enough. He's
Yeah.
sold Israel down the river.
Yep.
And that would be a huge mistake for the to put it
Well, I mean,
mildly, terrible mistake for the Republicans.
So, but what you're saying, they're just trying to the Biden people are trying to preempt that.
I think so. I think so. I think so. I think that if they can get the Republicans to be the hawkish party, the party that is ready to go, blow up the world for Israel, then that's a vote loser for the Republicans. The Republicans had a vote winner on Ukraine because, hey, this is, they could say, hey, this is Biden's war. Look, we're in danger of a nuclear exchange with Russia thanks to Biden. But now, we're gonna, they're all gonna try and outdo one another. Who's gonna do more for Israel? And that just isn't gonna win votes. That the public isn't gonna want to vote for an administration that's ready to launch an all-out war in the Middle East. I mean, it's just, Americans don't want to get into a massive land war in the Middle East yet again.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because the Republicans, they have a visceral. I mean, it's really gets down to levels of hate now. That's where the body politic is right now, and they have to really find a way not to give Biden a win on this. Okay, they're in a real danger of doing that. Right. Okay, but yeah. George is absolutely right. I mean, we can think of the Max Blumenthals and Aaron Montes and the Glenn Greenwalds. Okay, these are all people of the left, folks. Okay, they're all lefties. Okay, I admire them for their foreign policy immensely. Okay. Right. But the left doesn't want to dig too many layers into this here because, as we saw, it's not as such the case right now. Will be probably eventually the United States. But look at Europe. I mean, Europe. Thanks Angela Merkel. I mean, wow. Okay, no, absolutely. Because they this is an issue. Maybe they feel marginalized in these European countries in culture, but there's one issue you can't take away from them, and it's Palestine.
Exactly. And I think here in the United States, the people on the right who had been, well, not one penny more for Zelensky. We basically got to, cut Ukraine off. This is a ridiculous war. We're not going to send any more. They're all on board for Israel. So you're not going to spend any more on Ukraine, but you want to send all this money to Israel. You don't want U.S. Fighting any more wars, but you support Biden sending, the aircraft carrier groups into the Mediterranean. I mean, this is the position. Matt Gaetz is doing this. I mean, there are still, there are a few Republicans who are taking a principled position. I think Rand Paul or J.D. Vance. But even they, they still have to say, well, of course, I'm wholeheartedly supporting Israel. So, I mean, not one of them would ever say, well, I think we should basically stop this. I'm for Israel or I'm for Palestine. We should get some kind of a negotiating process or whatever, peace plan or whatever. And they was, we strongly support Israel, but I don't know whether America should get involved in another war. That that's about as far as someone like J.D. Vance is prepared to go.
Anyone that says that in either party gets primaried tomorrow. Okay. And it's really pathetic, George. It's really, really sad. And it's something, that's one of the very few, that's the only one that comes to mind right now, where you're hitting a third rail. I mean, just nobody wants to go there. Everyone is in fear. Okay. Yeah. And you know what, folks? That's to the detriment of Israelis and I would say Jews all around the world. Okay.
Right. No, I think exactly. So because ultimately, when you think about Israel, I mean, it's yes, it's right there in the Middle East, but it's surrounded by countries that are themselves quite powerful and quite important, growing in power and influence, with whom the United States, should have good relations. And yet this strange kind of relationship with Israel, because it is strange, and it's not, one can't really put it in the context of anything else. It isn't really part of any Cold War, geopolitical ambitions or whatever.
It's its own lane. It's its own category.
Exactly. Like in the way that we can explain what the United States is doing in Ukraine, however misguided, but at least, it has a certain logic, in terms of its geopolitical ambitions. But Israel doesn't have any logic. I mean, it's just, as
Okay,
you
well,
say, its own lane.
let's give the example. Involvement in Ukraine to hurt Russia, to
Right.
weaken Russia, to humiliate Russia,
That's
to
right.
make Russia experience a strategic defeat. But the United States is helping Israel to ethnically cleanse
Yeah. Exactly.
in a place called Gaza.
That's right.
Uh,
Yeah. What does that do for how does that in any way strengthen the United States? It doesn't, because it weakens the United States' position in the Middle East, because ultimately, even those countries that the United States regards as allies, are embarrassed by this. They just, they say, we can't, just like, basically the King of Jordan says, I can't meet you because of what's going on. That's it. And that's your great ally. It's been the ally first of the British and the Americans. And they say, I can't meet you because of what's going on here. So how is it in any way strengthening America's position?
And see, the entire American approach, irrespective of administration, is to peace can be brought to the Middle East if all the Arabs normalize relations with Israel, okay? And of course, that's all designed against Iran. Well, now you flip it upside down. So you have the Saudis vehemently coming out against what's going on against the people of Gaza, and you have Iran doing the same thing. And as a matter of fact, now we're going back decades now. Who can outbid the other Muslim country in support of their Palestinians? I mean, George, this has happened in 10 days.
Yeah, exactly. So it just doesn't do anything. Oh, and the peculiarity, and I mean, this is something we talked about before, is this strange American thing, which is the people who are making all these proclamations for Israel, they're not even Jews. I mean, it's like, Nikki Haley. I mean, if you're not a Jew, what's Israel to you? I mean, it's like you don't live there. I mean, you don't have a home there. You're not even a Jew, so you can actually, if you want to, abscond with some money, and then you want to find refuge somewhere where no one's going to extradite you, but at least, you can do it as a Jew. But if you're not, then it's hard to say why you would have an emotional attachment to a country that you have nothing to do with.
And if you confront these people and ask them, they actually don't know much about Israel or the conflict. They know very little other than bumper stick. Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel has the right to exist. I mean, there's about 3 or 4 other ones, and that's about it.
Yeah, that's right. Finish them. However you're going to do it, finish them. Okay, go in there, finish them. And that's like Hannity. Again, Hannity is what? He's a Catholic. So he's a Catholic again, so he's not even evangelical or whatever. I mean, he's a Catholic, but he has this, he goes crazy when it comes to the subject of Israel. You think, why? I mean, it's actually one of those bizarre kind of phenomena. It's very distinctly American. And of course, there's been some Americanization of Europe, like Britain, which is now completely lost all of its own kind of identity. Anything that was specifically British that was about Britain. You have the British politicians who sound exactly like the Americans, like James Cleverly. James Cleverly was almost from the start with this attack on the hospital. He was already saying, we mustn't jump to conclusions. Mustn't blame Israel for that. I mean, he's just all right away, whatever moment he's already there defending Israel.
And so here's a person in power, doesn't even know the demographics of his own country, apparently.
No, okay? Exactly.
Has no awareness of the electorate, apparently.
None at all.
I may be wrong, okay, but if there's a poll tax, we have to. What does the Muslim community think about this? I don't think they really care. Okay,
none. I mean,
should we have higher tariffs on oranges? What's the Muslim community think? I don't know if they have an opinion.
I don't think so. No.
Israel, Palestine. Yes, we have an opinion.
Right. Absolutely, and it is kind of, to say the least, ironic that politicians have been happily bringing in more and more immigrants from the Muslim world over the years, a lot of people warned and said, this is going to be a problem down the road. Let's bring no problem at all. And now they want to sound like Americans. They said, well, you've transformed the country. You now have an enormous Muslim population. You have absolutely no idea of how different Britain is from what it was 30, 40 years ago.
What was the purpose of Sergeant Schultz's visit?
Well, he had to atone for the Holocaust, for what Germany did to the Jews.
Oh, okay.
He had to bring it. It's always this peculiar thing when Germany does this. I got to atone the Holocaust. The problem with that argument is that, well, the people you should really be atoning to is the Arabs, because of you, the Arabs have had to endure this. It was your policy of driving out the Jews and then killing the Jews that led to the creation of the state of Israel at the expense of the Arabs. And then you bankrolled Israel. For decades, Germany bankrolled Israel out of guilt for the Holocaust. So if you're going to apologize, really, you need to go apologize to the Arabs, because they're the ones who have had to suffer the consequences of Germany. I mean, there's Germany who did this, and and who got punished for it? Not Germany, but the Arabs.
Yeah. It's what's her name? The woman that wrote "If Americans Only Knew" about the Weir. Her last name is
Alison Weir. Yeah,
Alison Weir. It's really quite astounding. Is that when people actually get reasonable, even-handed, okay, both sides have their claims. George and I know it really well, okay, but just to be exposed to that in America, they're not exposed to it at all. Okay, I mean, there was this 71-year-old guy. I mean, like in Chicago. He was watching the news, got upset with Palestinians. He was renting an apartment to a Palestinian family, and he went and attacked them. They killed a little boy because he watched TV.
Yeah. No, that's right. It's very little of that ever penetrates the U.S. conscience or anywhere else. I mean, it's very little is ever.
Well, George, come on, remember, you and I, we've cut our teeth on this with the PLO and Arafat. Remember the hijackings and the bombings, and of course, all were wrong. It should be condemned. But I mean, what Hamas did is deplorable as an organization as they are. They reminded the world, we're not going to allow you to forget about us.
Right. No, that's exactly right. Generally, I mean, there's very little information, and that has been really for decades about the situation with the Palestinians. I mean, I remember even in Britain back in the 1960s and 70s, there was only really one politician, a Labour politician, Christopher Mayhew, who would address that issue. And he would talk about the Palestinian refugees. But other than that, again, it was more or less, plucky little Israel being set upon by these masses of Arabs. They want to drive Israel into the sea. Extermination. They want to exterminate the Jews. They want to do this.
Land without a people without a land.
Yeah. That's right. So that was it. And again, the same thing being said now. There's no one to negotiate with. We don't have a negotiating partner. And they used to say this about NASA. Back then, NASA is so extremist, you can't negotiate. Total lie. But again, everyone, NASA, he's just this fanatic guy, and he's close to Moscow, so he's not anyone you can negotiate. Said the same thing with Sadat, and then they quickly changed the story. Well, maybe Sadat is a good guy, but before that, everyone thought, Sadat is this wild extremist.
Yeah, but it's just this legacy of colonialism and anti-Arab, anti-Muslim approach that it was just part and parcel, particularly of British and European approaches to that part of the world. And it's and then the element, the bizarre American element is the evangelicals. They're when Tony Blinken says, I come here as a Jew. Well, a lot of Jews will say, what are you doing there? Okay.
Right.
He doesn't speak for all Jews. Like there's no Muslim that speaks for all Muslims.
No,
Okay.
that's
And
right.
so it's abhorrent for so many people. I mean, I remember as a university student, they had these pro-Palestinian groups, and half the group was full of Jews. Okay.
Right. Oh, no,
But it's American evangelicals. They're the ones that are fanatics about
the
Israel.
American, but I think also the influence of the neoconservatives, the influence of AIPAC, the influence of that very powerful, Jewish lobby. I mean, the evangelical conservatives by themselves wouldn't be that influential. I mean, they lose most debates. I mean, basically, whether the abortion or anything else, they lose the debates. What's important is that in this case, you have a very powerful section of America's elite that is absolutely on board with Israel. I mean, and that's all the politicians from the Democrats or Republicans are all absolutely on board for Israel.
It's interesting. I'm not going to name names because they were private conversations, but two frequent guests on my program that have a background in government in one hand, in the intelligence community, in the other hand, in Congress, and I would ask them, I mean, can you disagree? And they said, sure, you can disagree all you want, but it won't move your career. Okay, right. You won't be fired for it either. You'll be forgotten. You'll just be ignored. Yeah. Okay, you can object, but you should realize that it's going to have no impact.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Well, when Walton Mearsheimer wrote that book, The Israel Lobby, and they said this is an enormously powerful group. Encompasses politicians, encompasses the media, and it's not in any way synonymous with the Jews. I mean, they try to smear Walton Mearsheimer. Oh, it's anti-Semitic. They say that the Jewish lobby is the Jews, and said no, it's the Israel lobby is something separate from the Jews. We didn't say the Jewish lobby, the Israel lobby, and that's so you have Sean Hannity, and then we're part of that, and then you have Democrat leaders like Chuck Schumer, and then so they're all in on this strange kind of grouping. That the moment there's anything in Israel, boom, you go into reflex action. Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel needs to do whatever it needs to do, and that's it. And then that just silences. And of course, anyone who criticizes Israel immediately is anti-Semitic.
And right,
anti-Semitic.
The people of the Donbass have a right of self-defense. The people of Donbass have the right of self-determination. The people of the see. That will all come on deaf ears because they have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay, right. It's only applied in one way. It's just, as George and I say, it's a separate category all by itself, and it doesn't pay any dividends whatsoever.
No.
In the short term, medium term, and long term.
No, exactly. It hasn't done anything. It doesn't do anything. For the United States, absolutely, that does nothing at all to strengthen the United States. It's just actually been a source of continued strain in the Middle East. All these countries will basically should be U.S. allies. Even during the Cold War, I mean, all this time they're doing, Saudi Arabia, they all hated the communists, they hated the Soviet Union. The last thing they wanted.
In Iran, it was the second Satan.
Right, but there's just one thing that they can't get past, which is this entity in the Middle East, this Israel entity in the Middle East, and so that's why it hasn't done anything at all to strengthen the United States. So every time you try to do is, as we were saying earlier, Israel is in the forefront of the global war on terror. No, it isn't. Israel is in the fight against the Soviet Union, is fighting communism. No, it isn't. but they have to justify it somehow because it makes no sense on its own terms.
Yeah. Where we go from here, I don't know. I mean, the Biden trip was such a bust in a weird way. I mean, I'm curious how Sean Hannity will interpret it.
Right. No. Well, I think he's going to say how by but it was just such a strange kind of. But again, with everything else Biden does, why do this?
Okay, what's immediately on the agenda, everyone, is, and I think George and I are basically, or at least we're over the target. I think there's hesitation for a land invasion. There's also the issue of the hostages, okay, or captives, or whatever word you want to use. That's going to be hard to say, well, these are the conditions of war. Okay, there is a directive within the Israeli military that it captured Israeli soldiers for example, in being held in Gaza. There's a directive to take that soldier out, kill them.
Right,
okay.
right. But we don't know whether, I mean, must be civilians as well among the hostages.
Must be. I mean, there was a heartbreaking. I saw a heartbreaking report on Al Jazeera. There was a Palestinian American, and this guy, he sounded like he was from like Chicago. I mean, he had a real strong accent. He said, "Look, I'm an American. You're getting. They want Americans to leave Israel. How about helping me out of this place? I'm at the Rafah gate. I'm ready to go. Okay." Right. I mean, it put in stark contrast of how Americans are treated even in this conflict here. So the captives issue is not going to go away, and that's not going to go away for the Israeli public.
No, I think that's right, and that's why I think that if I were to make a prediction, I think that the Israelis are going to bomb a little for a few more days, and then they're going to see if they can negotiate something like ceasefire plus release of some of the hostages. I mean, obviously, Hamas isn't going to release all of the hostages, but it'd be a kind of step-by-step release of hostages going together with a ceasefire. Just, that's what makes sense, because if you start an invasion, well, first of all, I mean, it's going to be horrific atrocities, but then the hostages will be killed.
Yeah, but
they may well be Americans. I mean, who knows how many Americans are among the hostages? So again, that's going to be very painful for the U.S. government.
The mess that Netanyahu has made for himself, because now he's really stuck between a rock and a hard place. Okay, I'm sure behind the scenes, the Jake Sullivans and people like that, there are conditions. I mean, they're not going to say it publicly because they want to show unity, absolute unity. But even they're thinking about the hostages and the 444 days of the hostage crisis with Iran. George and I remember it very well, as it was yesterday. Right. Okay, and then the Israeli public opinion. They haven't got their pound of flesh yet.
No, that's right. I mean, they haven't got their pound of flesh. On the other hand, they don't want to see the hostages killed. So again, Israelis don't really like, the fact that they make these swaps. These, the swap was it with that soldier, the Gilad Shalit, that soldier that was kidnapped, and I can't remember, was it 1,000 Palestinians were released?
Yeah.
For this one Israeli soldier. So the Israelis are very, very casualty averse. They're not just going to well, okay, we lost the hostages and that's all there is to it. They feel very strongly about that. So again, Netanyahu goes in and all the hostages are executed. That's not going to go down well.
George, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but if we add civilian and military casualties since October 7th, that's the largest number of any of these single conflicts that Israel has had since 1948. Maybe wrong there, but I think that's true.
Maybe
but what I'm just saying is that in 1 or 2 days, they took losses like they have never taken.
Yes, no, I think it's right. I think it's right within the few days. No, I think that's but the hostages are going to be a problem. And again, the Americans are going to say, if you're going to go in and then Americans are going to get executed, that's very painful for the United States, because I mean, the United States can make a decision for itself as to whether the hostages are alive or dead. Say, okay, we'll still do whatever we're going to do. Hostages, well, too bad. But then they're not going to leave it to Israel to make that decision as to whether American hostages are going to be killed or not killed. So it puts,
particularly George, particularly at the Rafah gate. I mean,
that's
publicly known that they're there.
Right. That's right. So that's why I just still think that Israel is not going to go in. That a few more days of this pummeling, and then they're going to negotiate something.
But this will be a strategic defeat, okay? And Hamas will, I asked my guests on my program, it's a pretty hard question, but it went along the lines as it was Hamas willing to commit suicide to keep the Palestinian issue on the agenda. And, obviously, one of the reasons why Hezbollah exists is because of their hatred for the state of Israel. So there's a lot in play right here. And then, the deterrence factor, which Israel's always about deterrence, well, will have been grossly degraded if your scenario plays out. Powerful countries, Israel is a powerful country, does have a powerful military. Let's not underestimate it. They don't take humiliation very well. Arabs have had to take humiliation for a long time. Okay,
right? But
it's not new for them.
No, but at the same time, what does Israel do? I mean, Israel essentially, okay, we'll kick the can down the road. I mean, that's what Israel has always done. Well, just kick the can down the road, and hope that somebody like Trump is just going to give us all kinds of goodies and handouts in return for nothing. Recognition of Jerusalem's the capital, recognition of Israeli annexation of the Golan Heights, canceling the JCPOA and so on. So, okay, that's their hope, but they can't deal with the Palestinian problem. I mean, back in the 1970s, at least the United States and the Soviet Union jointly approached the Middle East, and they kind of forced conferences, Middle Eastern conference, everyone takes part. I mean, you could do something like that now. United States, Russia, since together they could try and bring everyone together, bang heads together, but you can't do it.
Can't give them a win. Can't give them a win.
Okay. No, it can't be exactly. So,
but that's what I always say. That's a choice the United States has made. It's a choice. It's not forced on them.
Right.
It's a choice.
That's right. Exactly. That's the only way you can forward. Which is, you have to somehow get everybody around the table, you bang heads together and say, you got to cobble together some sort of an agreement. But
nobody's leaving the room, and there's
exactly,
no people.
That's right. But the United States is so, so overwhelmingly one-sided and will refuse to share it. I mean, the United States has dominated that whole Middle East process really since the 70s. It just took it over and is going to dominate it and doesn't want to share it with anyone else. Well, that's why we haven't really got anywhere.
Well, we can wrap it up this way. The optics of this bizarre trip to Israel by the American president. Who did he meet? The Israelis.
That's right.
Who didn't he meet with? Arab leader.
That's right. Okay. Exactly.
That's the photo op, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And Mahmoud Abbas, I mean, who knows where he is? I guess nobody really cares.
Yeah.
All right. I'll be back with George on Friday. I'm sure there'll be news flow, and this time tomorrow, George will be doing his live stream.
Exactly. Live stream, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Come with comments, criticisms, suggestions, and then on the way out the door for a well-earned drink, think about little Buddy, because Buddy is also saying, speaking of banging heads together, I'd like to bang a few heads together with, the people who are not, whipping any coins out of their pockets and dunk them in the tip jar. I would like to, put them all into a big room and bang heads together. So we don't want Buddy to get too aggressive. So if you have some money, whip it out, dunk it in this tip jar. That'll calm him down a little bit. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can work on the technology, and above all, we can just, soothe Buddy's rage, because he's mean. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.